The candidates are all going to speak. They each have 10-minute period uninterrupted. There's no engaging of opponents' opinions. They're speaking their opinions and what their solutions are. I'll be providing a card at 3 minutes, 1 minute, and when your time is up. After all of the candidates have their 10-minute speaking time, we'll have the question and answer period. Candidate responses are limited to 1 minute per question.
For the New York State Assembly, 126th District, Donna Lupardo, Democrat incumbent.
This is unusual. Usually I can't see over the plate. So I can see the whole group. Well, thanks for inviting me, and thank you for all the candidates coming and spending some time. It's really helpful for us as well. So it gets us thinking and helping us clarify what we work on. And I find myself these days really focused on 3 main things. Although there may be some other issues that you'd like a briefing on, I'd be happy to do that. But the calls I get in my office and the emails that we receive on a weekly basis, people are focused on 3 main items. One is jobs and the economy, the second is mandate relief, and the third is flood assistance. I have spent the greater portion of the last year on flood assistance and trying to drive important resources to our community to help with the recovery. I was very fortunate that the governor took up an idea of mine that I passed during the last flood, and again this time, to provide that 25% match the counties needed, the municipalities and the schools, because ordinarily FEMA will just cover 75% of the cost of repairs to schools, municipalities, bridges, road work. So they were able to be held harmless, but I'm very concerned that we look to prevention. Sometimes we get through with the flood and the immediate needs and helping people move forward with their lives, but we don't stop and bring down the Army Corps of Engineers and all the people who need to look at these streams so we can reclaim them and figure out ways that we can have spillways and assistance for communities that are so vulnerable. And I get calls all the time from Johnson City and Vestal and across the area saying, you need to come out and take a look at this. And DEC is not allowing us to clean out this creek. Well, we're going to be meeting with each municipality and bringing the DEC down and trying to figure out in advance of the budget what needs to be done, what type of money I need to be requesting, working with my colleague in the Senate to try to help these communities that are feeling so vulnerable and families that have so much anxiety when it rains. And no one should go to sleep at night worrying if we can do something about it. Obviously, climate is a concern, but I'm not in a position to change climate right at the moment, but we certainly can do what we can. On the jobs and the economy side, pretty proud of the work that's been done. Working with the Senate and with the governor, you probably noticed a change in the last couple of years. This governor is very strong, he's very specific, and he feels that he has a mandate to cut spending and get this economy back on the right track. So he came in and met with us right in the beginning of the session and said, we're not fooling around here, folks. I want on-time budgets, which we were able to work with him on. I want this budget deficit closed. No more built-in growth. He found out that we had, in previous years, built in a growth factor to many of the budgets. And he said, we don't have to have an automatic growth. Let's just try flat spending for a change, or reducing spending. So we were able to reduce spending, try to get a grip on efficiencies that were needed, duplication of services. And then he asked us to look at this property tax cap. I have to be honest, I was one of the folks who said, this makes very little sense without mandate relief. And I said, trust us, we need to do this as a first step, and we're going to come up behind it with the mandate piece. I'm still waiting for specifics on mandate relief. We have done some things, but not nearly as much as I think that we need to do. The governor has asked us to spend substantial amounts of money, something called New York Works, try to rebuild our infrastructure. And then he did something that we went along with him on, but I had my doubts. He set up regional economic development councils. For those of you who've been around long enough, every couple of years somebody comes up with a new scheme on how we're going to make sense of economic planning. And he insisted that Broome County join 7 or 8 other counties in a region. So now we're partnering with Tompkins and Steuben and Tioga and Shenango and others. And I'm shocked, to tell you the truth, at the kinds of progress that have been made, because we've made linkages to Corning and to Ithaca, Cornell and other places, and we have developed some themes working off of our alternative energy sector, working off of transportation industries, to really begin to develop some ways of maximizing the innovation that this community was built on. We were also able to bring some vital resources to Binghamton University. You probably see the construction going on up on the parkway there. It's really quite significant. Millions and millions of dollars have been invested up there for state-of-the-art facilities. One of my criteria for supporting those efforts is to make sure it benefited local people. So we weren't innovating, that we were developing entrepreneurs to bring those innovations into this community. We've seen how it started working already in Endicott at the microelectronics manufacturing facility at Endicott Interconnect, where they're building the things we're inventing right up there at Binghamton. And I could go on and on this subject, and I'm proud of this because we have a strong leader, and we have people who are willing to cooperate and work across party lines to get something done. And this is what people wanted to see. As far as the mandate stuff goes, we have capped Medicaid growth for counties. It's going to be phased in the next couple of years. We're only one of 2 states, unfortunately, that charges the localities for Medicaid. And if we were to take it fully over, it would be billions of dollars. And honestly, I think that's the way we ought to go, because 100%, or nearly 100% of the county's tax levy goes to pay for Medicaid. It's not fair to taxpayers, especially in communities like ours, that are older and poorer, who can least apt to be able to afford to pay into the Medicaid system. So I'm hoping that we can get some additional relief in that regard. But I've signed on as one of the primary sponsors of the Unfunded Mandate Reform Act, which is going to put a filter through everything that comes down the line. I've started voting no on bills that on the face of it sound really, really valuable, but I can see where it's going to impact our localities, and I can't get behind it. So I voted against quite a few items in the last year or two, which I'd be happy to tell you about. Also, I've been a real big champion for education aid reform. Our schools are crippled by mandates, but one of the biggest cripplers have to do with the way school aid is formulated. And upstate schools are really at a disadvantage because of a constitutional, not constitutional in the way you mean it, I mean it in the way that it's instituted in our formula. Downstate schools and the suburbs are oftentimes receiving more aid than they deserve. 3 minutes. Let me tell you about a couple of other items that may be of interest. I chair the Legislative Commission on Science and Technology. After you've been in the legislature for a number of years, you wind up starting to specialize in a couple of things. I specialize, of course, on the matters that are in the committees I serve on, which are veterans, environmental conservation, transportation, higher education, and a couple of others. But I've been asked to coordinate for the state the science and technology efforts. And it really boils down to making sure that the dollars that we spend on research actually wind up helping our communities. You can go across the area, and in fact, to her credit, the county executive and others are starting to partner on job incubator to put into downtown, where we can take these budding companies and provide them with the resources they need to develop jobs right here. You know, I always say that the next Watson or the next Johnson is to go to school or building a business. Not that we want to recreate that era, but we want to foster the kinds of invention and that spirit that brought those people to this area. And many of those hardworking people are still here and want to advance their careers. Also, as I mentioned, I'm on the Environmental Conservation Committee. I've been asked, along with Senator Libous, to be on a panel. We haven't met recently because the DEC is still wrangling over details over hydrofracking, but I'm on the governor's panel to discuss how to potentially move forward with that activity. And it's gotten complicated. Many people have raised important questions that we have been forced to step back and think about, having to do with health, public, environmental concerns, and others. And as tempting as it is to embrace the economic potential, I have felt an obligation to raise the questions that many of my constituents in my urban districts have raised. So for me, I want to move forward, working with my colleagues to continue the economic recovery. It was very tough when the economy collapsed on us. Wall Street took a dive. Doing the things we can as a team, trying to really hold everyone accountable for this mandate relief that was supposed to come after we capped property taxes, and also to keep the pressure on flood relief, for prevention, not just recovery, and keep our eye on the ball, make sure all the right questions are asked when it comes to something as important as high volume hydrofracking for natural gas. So I'd be happy to answer questions later, and I appreciate your invitation. Thank you.